I was pulling the loose baseboard away from Mama's bedroom wall when I found proof that I'd been living her exact same lie for 40 years. 3 days after burying my mother, my fingers found something that would shatter my marriage, my choices, everything I thought was right about my life, something that proved every decision I'd made was wrong. The leather diary was wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, stuffed behind the baseboard like contraband. I held it with trembling hands in her empty room, where her lavender perfume still haunted every breath. The hospice bed was gone, but the carpet indent remained, marking where Dorothy Henderson had spent her final months, keeping secrets as death circled closer. At 60, I believed I'd inherited everything that mattered from Mama. Her stubborn chin, her way with words, her inability to trust completely. What I didn't know was that I'd also inherited her curse, and I was about to discover just how deep it ran. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to discover about the woman who raised me. The first page made my hands shake so violently, I nearly dropped the book. March 15th, 1962. Ronald asked me to marry him today. I said yes because it's what everyone expects, what society demands of a respectable colored woman. But my heart belongs to someone who can never be mine. I wonder if real love means choosing what's right over what feels true, or if I'm just a coward afraid to fight for what I want. Ronald was my father, the gentle man who'd raised me with quiet strength, never once raising his voice. The someone else, that was completely new. It shattered every foundation I'd built my understanding of our family on. I sank onto Mama's hardwood floor, the same floor where I'd played as a child while she hummed gospel hymns. Now I knew what that anger in her movements was about. She wasn't mad at the mess. She was furious at herself for choosing safety over truth. The entries that followed painted a picture of a woman I'd never met. My mother wrote about sneaking to late-night jazz clubs, dancing until her feet bled, about a married man named Marcus who made her laugh until she forgot propriety. She wrote about the night I was conceived. I was with Marcus tonight, and for 3 hours I forgot I was engaged to Ronald. We talked about running away together, about the music we'd make. Then I came home and Ronald was waiting, worried sick, and I realized I'm not brave at all. I'm going to marry a good man and spend the rest of my life wondering what if. The words hit like a physical blow. I'd spent my entire childhood thinking Mama was the strongest woman alive, unshakable, confident. But here she was at 22, admitting she felt trapped and terrified. What destroyed me wasn't just learning about Marcus. It was seeing how history had repeated itself with surgical precision. When I was 24, I'd walked away from the love of my life to marry David. Not because I loved David more, but because he was everything my family wanted: educated, successful, safe, a prominent lawyer who looked good in photos. Marcus had been a jazz musician who couldn't give my mother security. James had been a struggling artist who couldn't give me the life everyone said I deserved. Different men, same choice, same regret. The parallel was so perfect, it felt like a curse. Growing up, Mama had seemed unreachable in a way I couldn't explain. Loving, but distant. Present, but somehow absent, like she was listening for something the rest of us couldn't hear. Now I knew what it was. She'd been listening for the life she'd given up. As I read deeper, patterns emerged that made my chest feel like it was caving in. Mama wrote about choosing security over passion, about staying quiet when she wanted to scream. She wrote about watching me make the same mistakes. April 3rd, 1986. Watch Diana with that boy James today, the one who paints pictures and talks about changing the world. She looks at him the way I used to look at Marcus, like he's the only person who really sees her. I want to tell her to run away with him, to be braver than I was. But instead, I hear myself saying the same things my mother said to me. Be practical. Be sensible. I hate myself for it, but I can't seem to stop. I remembered that conversation. I was 24 and head over heels in love with James, a painter whose work took my breath away. Mama had sat me down and very gently, very reasonably explained why James wasn't right for someone like me, someone with my education, my opportunities. She'd been so convincing that I'd broken James's heart and married David 6 months later. Reading her words now, I realized Mama hadn't been protecting me from James. She'd been protecting me from becoming her, a woman who spent her whole life wondering what if. But what I found next in that diary would change everything I thought I knew about sacrifice and motherhood. But instead of saving me from her fate, she'd guaranteed I'd share it. The most devastating revelation came buried in the diary, an entry dated on my 16th birthday that stopped my heart. March 8th, 1978. Watched Diana at the piano today. She was playing something she'd written herself, something wild and beautiful. For a moment, I saw myself at that age, all raw talent and hope. Then I panicked. I made her stop and practice scales instead. I hope someday she forgives me for making her choose practical over beautiful. I remembered that day with perfect clarity. I'd been playing a song I'd written about flying, about breaking free. Mama had walked in, listened for 30 seconds, then gently closed the piano lid. Practice your Bach, Diana. That's what will get you into Juilliard. I'd never played my own music again. I'd gotten into Juilliard, graduated with honors, then stopped playing piano entirely because music had stopped feeling like freedom. Reading Mama's words now, I understood she'd killed my music the same way her mother had killed hers. A family tradition I'd never recognized. The systematic murder of dreams passed down like a genetic disease. As I read deeper, I discovered that Mama had never completely let go of Marcus. She'd kept every letter he'd sent, attended his exhibitions in secret, watching the life she might have lived. November 12th, 1995. Went to Marcus's funeral today. Sat in the back where Dorothy Henderson wouldn't be recognized. He died thinking I'd never loved him enough to leave Ronald. I died 40 years ago when I chose security over truth. Marcus was dead. The great love of her life was gone, and she'd never told him how she really felt, or so I thought. What I discovered in the final pages would haunt me for the rest of my life. As I flipped to the final entries, my world tilted again. June 20th, 2019. Saw a man at the grocery store today who looked exactly like Marcus. Same eyes, same smile. It wasn't him, of course. Marcus has been gone for 24 years. But for a moment, my heart forgot. The man's name tag said Mark. Marcus's son, maybe? I wanted to ask, but Dorothy Henderson doesn't talk to strange men. Dorothy Johnson would have been brave. But the last entry changed everything I thought I knew about grief and loss. February 14th, 2020. Valentine's Day. Called the wrong funeral home in 1995. Marcus Johnson died last month, not 25 years ago. I've been mourning a stranger. The Marcus I loved has been alive this whole time. I could have called. I could have written. But I didn't. And now it's too late. He died thinking I never loved him. I stopped breathing. The diary fell from my hands. Mama had spent 25 years mourning the wrong man. She'd attended the funeral of Marcus Williams, not Marcus Johnson. 2 different people with the same first name, and she'd been too devastated to realize the mistake. The Marcus she'd loved had died just 4 years ago. He'd been alive her entire marriage to my father. Alive when I was born, when I graduated, when I got married. All those years of wondering what if, and he'd been alive the whole time. For the first time, I understood why Mama had always seemed unreachable. She hadn't been protecting herself from the world. She'd been protecting herself from hope, because hope was more terrifying than regret. I thought about David, about our marriage that had died so slowly neither of us had noticed, about our separate bedrooms, about the piano gathering dust for 20 years. That night, I did something Dorothy Henderson had never done. I told the truth. I called David and asked him to come over. When he arrived, I handed him the diary. "Read the first entry," I said. He read it, looked up with confusion, then understanding, then relief. "This is about us too, isn't it?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "We've been Ronald and Dorothy for 20 years, David. Comfortable and respectable and completely miserable." "I know about James," he said softly. "I've always known. The same way you probably know about Sarah." Sarah, his law partner. I'd suspected for years but never asked. "What do we do?" I asked. "What your mother never did," he said. "We choose truth over comfort." The divorce was amicable. David moved in with Sarah. I bought a small apartment downtown near the old Jazz District. For the first time in 40 years, I was alone. And for the first time in 40 years, I was free. I started playing piano again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, then with wild abandon. I played the song I'd written about flying, then wrote new ones about regret and freedom and the courage it takes to start over at 60. 3 months after Mama's funeral, I was playing at a small club downtown when I noticed an elderly man in the front row. He looked familiar in a way that made my chest tight. I had no idea I was about to meet the ghost from my mother's past. When I finished my set, he approached the piano with careful steps and eyes that held decades of unfinished conversations. "That was beautiful," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a lifetime. "Reminded me of someone I used to know, a woman who played like that back in the 60s, like her soul was trying to escape through her fingertips." My heart stopped beating. "Her name was Dorothy," he continued, tears gathering in his eyes. "Dorothy Johnson. Mama's maiden name." "I'm Marcus," he said, so softly I almost didn't hear him. "And I think you might be her daughter." The room seemed to spin around us. Marcus, not dead, not gone, standing right in front of me, looking at me with eyes that looked exactly like the ones I'd been staring into in mirrors my whole life. "But she went to your funeral," I whispered. He laughed, but it sounded like crying. "That was my cousin, Marcus Williams. Different middle name, different life, same bad timing. Your mother went to the wrong service. I went to hers 3 months ago." We stared at each other across 60 years of missed chances and broken hearts. "She loved you," I said, because someone had to finally say it out loud. "Every day, until the day she died." "I know," he said, and his voice broke completely. "I loved her too. Every day for 60 years. That night, Marcus told me about my mother. Not Dorothy Henderson, the respectable wife and mother I'd known, but Dorothy Johnson, the wild-hearted girl who danced until her feet bled and dreamed of running away to make music with the man she loved. He told me about letters she'd written but never sent, about songs she'd hummed that reminded him of her laugh. "She was wrong about one thing," he said, watching me with eyes that held all the conversations she'd never had the courage to have. "You're here, aren't you? You're playing music that would make her proud. You chose truth over safety." I looked at this man who'd loved my mother longer than I'd been alive, this piece of her hidden history that had somehow found its way back to us and made a choice Mama never could. "Tell me everything," I said. "Tell me about the woman I never got to know." And there, with jazz music floating around us, Marcus and I finally had the conversation my mother never could.